Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Spicer, Assistant Professor of Digital Journalism in the Communication Theater Department here at Millersville University. I'm with Dr. Nivedita Bagchi, Associate Professor in the Government and Political Affairs Department. And we are going to be talking about the Trump phenomenon in the 2016 election and basically what it means and what's happening in this campaign. So the first question that I wanted to start with, Dr. Bagchi, is there seems to be a sort of strain of white supremacism that is underlying what's happening with Trump. It's not necessarily, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush and call all Trump supporters Klan members or anything like that, but a sort of white nationalism is present there. And I wonder, would you say that that's an accurate characterization of what's happening? Is that an element of what's happening? Is that a big part of what's happening, or just kind of there in the background as noise?
Well, it's certainly a part of what's happening, and it's important, obviously, to note it. And then I think the bigger question is why? Why do certain people gravitate towards certain candidates? I think it was yesterday or today, we heard about a white supremacist group that put out a robocall in Vermont, and essentially asking Vermonters to support Trump. So certainly there is an undercurrent there. But I do think that the larger part of this with Trump is that Trump is actually able to draw in a lot of different types of people, a lot of different demographics. So that is one part of his demographics in terms of support, but that's very, very far from the only part. And I think it's important to remember that he draws in people that are, at least so far, he seemed to draw in people that are very evangelical, that are fairly moderate, that are lower income, that have lower education but higher education as well. So he seems to draw in a lot of larger demographics, which is obviously something that you have to ask yourself, why are such large swaths of people, of such different people, attracted to this candidate?
Yeah, and extending on that, there are three things that I can think of that this idea of him drawing in different people and it's being sort of unexpected. One is, right, I'm not a Christian myself, but I know enough to know that you say 2 Corinthians, not 2 Corinthians. And yet he has Christian voters voting for him. I heard this morning that in some of the turnout numbers for Nevada that he won 40-some% of Hispanic voters in the turnout, and you would think that a guy that wants to build a wall to keep Hispanic people out of America would not do that well with them. And the second is, and this goes to my second question, how is it possible that a guy who owns a gold toilet, he literally sits on a throne of gold, how is it that he is able to have a populist message that sounds authentic, that brings in populist people, that has, I've seen quotes in articles from supporters where they've said, he speaks for the working man. I really feel like he speaks for the common man. And I think the guy owns a gold toilet. How can he know anything about the common man? So what do you think is, take that in any direction with any of those three groups.
So I want to address all three parts of that, and I might get back to you on which those three were, because I might forget some. So let's start with the Hispanic question. Yes, it seems that he drew in a lot more Hispanic support in Nevada than he should have, if you follow traditional political rules, certainly. But a poll just came out today, which was a Washington Post poll with, I think, Univision, that said that 8 in 10 Hispanics do not support Trump. Nevada, the reason Nevada is a little bit of an outlier is because there's such a small number of people that voted in terms of Hispanic people. So because it's a very small N, as we call it in political science-y, right? It's too small to generalize out from there. So that's the first part.
That 40-some% might mean that like only 10 Hispanic voters showed up and he got 4 of them, and then the news said he got 40%.
I think they said something between 100 to 200 showed up. They're not 100% sure, but something in that number. So that's the first part. The second part, the bigger question is, how does someone who is so wealthy attract people that are clearly not? And I think part of this speaks to the culture or the climate that we have right now. People are not attracted to Trump, I don't think, because of who he is as an individual, though there's some of that. I think a lot of it is anti-government, anti-establishment voters. And they say, here is a person who doesn't have a super PAC. Here is a person who's funding his own campaign. They often say things like, he speaks the truth. Because why should he lie? He has his own money. He's not beholden to anyone, right?
Nobody's puppet.
Exactly. And I think it's the same thing that has Bernie Sanders, again, not saying they're the same candidate, but has Bernie Sanders is as popular for the same reason. He doesn't have a super PAC. He's no one's puppet. He's kind of his own man, right? Speaks truth to power. That kind of an attitude.
They're both coming from with their base from places of anger, but there are different aesthetics to that anger.
Yes,
perhaps.
and they want different things, of course, radically different things. But I think it comes from that same mentality. Government is not serving us well, and we need to do something that is radical. That is a radical change from what we have now, not insiders. We don't want more of the same.
Right. So do you think that that's also part of the aspect of religious voters going for him, even as he says something like, Planned Parenthood does some good things, which out of anybody else's mouth I would hear and I go, that's a pretty reasonable statement. That's nice. But out of Trump, I think, oh, there's something going on. He's got a curveball coming, right?
Well, see, this is the thing. So he talks about defunding Planned Parenthood, and then in a Republican debate says, Planned Parenthood does good things. And you say to yourself, is he trying to lose the primary? Because, I mean, that's what you would expect. And then he has this outsized win. And I think it's, again, I think they read it as, well, he's his own man. He doesn't stick to the orthodoxy, right? And so I think his followers kind of see that as further evidence of his independence and individuality, rather than, oh, he's not towing the party line, but he should. Because I don't think anyone really, any of Trump's supporters cares about the party line at this point.
Right, yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be Trump supporters.
Right, and this seems to be confusing elites in the conservative movement that thought they had the base on board with a program, and they're coming to find that the base spends, they don't read National Review and Hayek and spend a lot of time thinking about the importance of this purist ideology. They are just on the anger train, basically.
They are. I think they are really angry on both sides. They are really angry. Both Republicans and Democrats are angry. And they think that there isn't, you know, a student in my class said this the other day, who cares who we vote for? Because in the end, it's all going to remain the same. And obviously, as a political scientist, my knee-jerk response is, I'm sorry, did you just say who cares who we vote for?
Right, yeah.
But I think this is where it's coming from, that we need to vote for someone who's very, very different. Now, having said that, this is potentially dangerous.
Right.
Because, of course, there's always an element of danger when you don't know what that candidate is going to do. And I do think that with Trump, there is that element of danger. Because he seems to have this idea that you can just say whatever you want, but in some ways he's not specific. He thrives on not being specific. And so I think Trump ultimately turns out being a demagogue, right? So it's a person who wants to say what he wants to say in order to win. And so you don't know. He might be way more moderate than he's letting on, or he might be way more radical than he's letting on, but who knows if all he's doing is saying what he needs to in order to get votes.
Yeah. So there's an element of how our politics have evolved over the last half century or more, and one of my favorite stories about how media are a component of this is that Nixon, when he was running for president, is sitting backstage waiting to go on television, talking to the producer. And he says something to the effect of, it's a real shame that a guy has to use a scam like television to get elected to president these days. And the producer says to him, well, this isn't a scam. This is the way the world's going to work now. You won't be able to get elected dog catcher if you don't look good on TV. And that, just as an aside, that producer turned out to be Roger Ailes, who now runs Fox News. And I think about how it's evolved through Reagan and Clinton, who were both ready-made television candidates. is Trump, how much of the Trump phenomenon is this is sort of the next step from Kennedy to Reagan to Clinton to now we have Trump, and it's almost a de-evolution in the television candidate?
Well, certainly he knows reality TV, right?
Yep.
I think that he knows how to exploit social media, all media, really. I mean, he really does exploit it better. But I think part of the reason he exploits it so well is simply because he's not doing the conventional things. I think if he was just doing the conventional things, they would follow it like a conventional candidate. But he's not. And that, I think, makes a huge difference, both with his supporters and with the media, because it's perfect for the 24-hour news cycle, right? And he's perfect for the 24-hour news cycle. Having said that, I do think that, fundamentally, that doesn't mean that this is another step. This could be an anomaly, or this could be an evolution. But I would be surprised if this was the next step, and all candidates from now on. Look, candidates always try to exploit social media, and especially even with Obama, President Obama did a great job getting people's cell phone numbers and sending out mass texts and stuff like that.
That whole data collection process was
exactly.
amazing.
It was really, really good. But I don't know, because Trump seems to be unique in that he comes from a background and then uses that background to project himself as bigger.
Yeah. And he today he called Mitt Romney a dope on Twitter, and I think if Rubio went on Twitter and tweeted and called somebody a dope, Rubio would be giving an apology press conference later in the afternoon.
Well, because I
but
think
Trump
people
doesn't
say
need to.
that's just Trump.
That's just him. So
that's it. And I think his supporters say that. Even his detractors say that. That's just Trump.
So the key to getting away with stuff is establishing yourself as an awful human being to begin with. I think that's a good lesson for our PR students to learn.
Well, at least unpredictable human being, I would say. I think he is unpredictable. I think he's unpredictable with policy, and I think he's unpredictable as an individual as well.
So we're getting to the end, and we need to wrap up, but I'll sort of put these two last questions into one question. We can close on this thought. It seems as he gets closer to the nomination, as this thing seems like an actual possibility, he's starting to moderate both his tone, despite calling Mitt Romney a dope, moderate both his tone and the content of his language. So do you think that this is a product of, he says, okay, I did what I needed to do to get my traction. Now that I have it and I'm close, I need to start looking real now. I need to take this seriously. Is he actually maybe deep down a real serious person, and he's just thought he needed to be an entertainer to get started, and now he's moderating it? And that sort of sub-question is, how likely do you think it is that in January of 2017 we see the inauguration of President Trump?
Well, of course, I can't channel him. And so I don't know if he's a serious person who is an entertainer or an entertainer who pretends to be serious sometimes. I think he's aware that he needs to, at some point, transition to being a little more presidential, as we like to call it. I think he is trying to get there. I think he has definitely moderated over the last few weeks, I would say. And I think he sees it more of a possibility. Now, how likely are we in January to see President Trump? I think it's still far too early to say. It depends on when Kasich drops out, when Ben Carson drops out. It depends on if Rubio can even win Florida right now. His polls are way off in Florida. It depends on if Cruz can win Texas. Right now, depending on polls, he's 20 points up ahead on Trump or a tie. So I think it's way too early to say. But I think both Democrats and Republicans have to gear up for the possibility that there's at least a candidate Trump for a long time.
Yep. So, and I think you're absolutely right. If Texas goes Trump and Florida goes Trump, I think all bets are off
I think if
the
Texas
Republican
goes Trump
convention
and
is going
Florida,
Trump.
yeah, yeah, yes, I agree.
Well, I want to thank you for coming into the studio today
You
to
are
talk to
welcome.
us, Dr. Bagchi, and I'm Dr. Robert Spicer, and thank you for joining us.